Jacqueline Galvez, I'm a senior.
And James Hegler, and I'm also a senior.
Our overall topic for today's episode is mental health. So to start off our interview, how would you two say you manage or improve your mental health?
Have a bunch of random hobbies that I'll sometimes pick up, and that keeps me busy. And I feel like getting busy helps you maintain and not go crazy. What about you?
So I also go to the gym, kind of as a stress reliever to kind of clear my head a bit, which it is, it is said that exercise is one of the best ways to reduce stress. I dabble in a few hobbies, most notably crochet, and it really helps me just not think about everything else that's going on. Another way that I kind of just, relax and try to manage my mental health would be literally doing nothing. Genuinely, I go home, I change into some PJs, and that's about it. And I just relax and just force myself not to worry about all these other things for the betterment of my mental health.
Our next question is, how does school affect your mental health? And if the block scheduling is good for you guys?
Personally, school has a conflicting impact on my mental health. So it definitely has a positive impact, but it also has a negative impact. For example, I love learning, the education that comes along with school. I truly love. I also love my teachers. That's probably one of my favorite aspects of school. But the whole thing of bringing school home with homework and the stress of that can get a bit overwhelming, I will admit. And even as a senior with only 2 classes, with our new block schedule, it can get overwhelming. And specifically about block schedule, it's a lot to adjust to. The hour and a half classes, I find it difficult to keep my attention span on track with my teachers and stay focused. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad change. I think it'll just have to see how it works in the coming years.
So for me, something that I've tried to get through my head recently is a lot of things are not that deep. And I know that sounds like maybe I'm a bad student, but I promise I'm not. I get my work done. But if I'm really, really stressing out about something, I'll just, close my laptop, go take a couple laps outside, take a snack, maybe go for a shower, go take a shower, and tell myself, this is important, but I don't have to, worry or obsess about this, because I remember my freshman, sophomore years, and even some of my junior year as well, try to convince myself this has to get done. If it's not perfect, it's not good enough for me. And so it got to the point where I was having panic attacks over projects, or stressing out and crying and calling my friends to rant about these things that I was doing. But it's really not that deep. And I kind of like block schedule. Kind of a controversial opinion, but I kind of like it. Only 2 classes, and I feel like it gives me time to get my homework done in classes as well. So I feel like it helps me be productive.
I think that schools don't really teach you the skills to be able to handle all of the classes that you may be taking and all of the clubs that you might join, because I've seen a lot of my friends have slowly just started to not be involved in school stuff because of how much they were involved their freshman and sophomore year, because it's genuinely draining and exhausting to be in 8 different clubs at one time. Instead of pushing students to be in so many clubs, we should be getting them involved in something, one thing they really like, rather than pushing everyone to be involved in everything.
According to the CDC, over 1 in 5 youth ages 13 to 18 currently or some point during their life have had seriously debilitating mental illness. And what is your opinion on this statement?
Honestly, I don't find it that surprising, especially from personal experience I've had with mental health, that friends have had with mental health. It's no surprise. But I also think the reason why we have a statistic like that is because of the awareness that we've brought to mental health. It's a lot more important in society nowadays, and something that older generations may say is that this generation is too soft, because you didn't have such alarming numbers of serious mental illnesses and such, maybe a couple decades ago. But that's, again, because there was no awareness to it. At the time, all they could do is deal with it, or else they would just be treated really poorly if they had mental illnesses. And I think it's really good, and it's really good progress that we are able to at least recognize the issues. Now it's time to fix them.
So going off of that, I do also believe that, in the past there has been a lot of stigma about talking about mental health, and I'm glad that it's being talked about, but at the same time, like James said, I think we need to find a way to be able to fix these problems, because if we don't find a way to fix this, then it can just easily become into a competition of who's more depressed. But I don't think it should be about that. Yeah, I think we need to find ways in which we can learn to cope, because you can't change anything in your past that has given you this trauma, this anxiety or depression, but you can find ways to cope. And I'm not saying mask it and pretend that it's not there, but definitely find ways to cope with it. So
How does mental health affect relationships and vice versa? I would say platonically and romantically.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, I really relate to Taylor Swift when she said she would have made such a lovely bride. What a shame she's messed up in the head. Because I feel like a lot of times I would overthink a lot of things. So if I didn't get a response back in an hour, I would be like, oh my gosh, they totally hate me now. Or if they didn't tell me that they were busy, I would be like, oh my gosh, they're probably talking to a bunch of other people. But friendship wise, it's also the same thing. So it's a lot of overthinking and a lot of having to ask for reassurance, which sometimes comes with that feeling of being putting all of this pressure on them when you don't want to. Or that's also another thing, having to constantly be I'm sorry, if I'm bothering you for saying or doing this, and then constantly having to ask for forgiveness, which then at some point kind of annoys the other person. So then it's just kind of a cycle. Also trusting people, I feel that's a huge thing for me. Problems letting people in, but once I do, I let them in completely, and I feel that's sometimes also harmful, not knowing where to draw a clear line. It's a little weird sometimes, because sometimes I end up telling somebody my whole life story after knowing them for a little bit, and then sometimes I've known these people for years, and I'm oh, I can't even tell them if my stomach hurts. So I don't know.
So there is there's a serious connection between mental health and the state of our relationships, friendships, and all that with our family. I mean, romantic, platonic, all of it. It's crazy how much it really impacts. And I know that in relationship, overthinking, like Jacqueline mentioned, is so prevalent. I mean, at least for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of people too. That you're just so almost fixated on this individual that it's they become you're everything, and that
an unhealthy obsession with them,
right.
kind of, yeah.
It's draining for you, it's draining for the other person, it's not healthy. And a big thing to recognize is that a lot of overthinking stems from self-esteem issues and feeling insecure, and that's easy, and that can reflect in your relationships and your friendships, by getting jealous or by the overthinking and all those little toxic, technically they're toxic aspects. Relationships and friendships can affect your mental health in the sense that sometimes your friends or your family can get a little overwhelming and kind of push you over the edge, and that can cause a multitude of issues. But I think a really good way to kind of avoid that would be to establish boundaries. Boundaries are, get some clear, established boundaries, very distinct, so that you don't get kind of walked all over, and that you protect your mental health.
Okay, going off of what James said, establishing clear boundaries and also communication. I never realized how much communication actually matters until I lost that person that I kind of cared about. And so now it's something that I regularly do with my friends. I'll ask them how are you doing? Like, tell me like how your day was. And I know that's such like a basic thing to say, but sometimes it can have an impact on other people, because you don't want to just be telling them like all of your stuff, all of your things, and kind of feel like you're putting all of this pressure on them. You also want to be helping them out as well. So boundaries, communication, and yeah, I think that's important.
I personally would love to like touch on just toxic relationships in general, and I'm somebody who's been in multiple, and that's not to call somebody out. I am in a stable place to admit that I've also done toxic things in relationships, and that's what happens when you have some of the issues that I have and have go through like such strong traumatic experiences. You don't really know how to love correctly, and that can cause you to be toxic a lot of the times. And I think that this is an issue that could almost be like deleted from teen issues if we would just talk about it, because nobody knows the signs of an abusive relationship, and by doing that, somebody who might have abusive tendencies cannot learn to undo those things if nobody brings up said abusive tendencies. So not only would it help the people being abused, or not necessarily abused, but being in these toxic situations, it can also help the people being toxic and help them change their ways and things like that. So I feel like it's something that should be more talked about in schools.
Yeah. Also, like, going off of that, when I was in that relationship, it was a bit toxic at times. And like, it wasn't just him, it was me too as well. But something that I did learn that was really important from that is that it's okay to allow yourself to like feel love from others. Because I remember I used to feel like I was like this unlovable burden, and that like if I talked about my problems or issues to other people, they would view me differently. But I feel like with trust, whenever you trust someone, you should be able to feel, like you can talk about your problems. So it's important to learn how to love and how to be loved as well, because a lot of times people can also push that away because they feel like, they're kind of unlovable, or they feel like they aren't deserving of this. Or like in Perks of Being a Wallflower, where where they say a lot of people like accept the love they think they deserve. Mm-hmm. I think that's really true. A lot of times, maybe we'll see relationships, like whether it's our parents or like friends or other people, and we feel like we have to mimic that because that's the only love that we know. But I think it's important for us to know how we truly can feel that love and love other people before getting into a relationship. But that is something that I learned after that, it's kind of helpful.
I would also like to bridge off of Jacqueline's statement about like feeling like unlovable. Feeling unlovable, feeling insecure, having low self-esteem, and, like I mentioned, how that's able to manifest into toxic behaviors in a relationship and friendships and all that. I just think it's really important, that you do matter, mm-hmm. that you are lovable, that you do deserve nice things. You deserve for people to be kind to you. Like, you deserve nice things. Like, that's what, everyone here, Rowan, Kylie, Jacqueline, myself, and everyone listening to this, you need to know that you do matter, and that you shouldn't feel like you're not important, or that everyone else is more important than you, and you shouldn't sacrifice yourself for other people or anything like that, because you have a worth too.
And okay, I'm sorry, we're kind of like really digging deep into this, but something that I've heard a lot of people say is like, you can't let others love you until you love yourself. And I really disagree with that, because I feel like you can't love other people until you actually know what love is. And a lot of times, like obviously we're in high school, a lot of times the so-called love isn't actually, the real thing, but it does teach you a lot about how to care for others. And I'm not just talking like romantically wise, but also like in platonic relationships, like with your parents, with your teachers, with people around you. Like, you need to learn how to love, and sometimes you learn that by reciprocating, the way that you do receive that love. Comments?
Wait. To go off with what you guys said with toxic relationships, I feel like especially in high school, like people will mistake being in love with someone with like love bombing. And like basically it's like someone showing you extreme amounts of like love to like manipulate you into like staying with them. And as someone who has personally been through that, I feel like yes, you should reciprocate love from others, but you should also like learn to be aware, because some people have like malice intents behind it. And especially in high school, I feel like this is going to sound really bad, but it's really, high school relationships really aren't that important, because I feel like most of the time you're going to leave, like you learn from it, but when you leave high school, there's like a small chance you're going to stay with that person. And for the people it does happen to, that's great, and that's amazing for you. Jealous, you know. But like in all reality, the most, like from my personal viewings and observation, most people don't end up with someone that they dated in high school. It's a experience, but don't let it like take over you and let it affect you in ways that it changes you and like who you are and how you react to things. Because I used to like not trust people after dating that certain person, but like really you have to learn that not everyone is that same way, and not everyone's going to treat you that way. And like it's kind of like what Jacqueline said, it's really not that deep.
You don't always have to say I love you back. Like that is not mandatory. And if you feel like you're being like, I guess forced, or not forced, because I wasn't being forced to say it,
Like pressure.
but if you feel like there's like this weird pressure to say it back, then maybe you just aren't ready to say it, and that's totally okay as well. Like you don't have to love someone in like that romantic aspect, like just because you've been dating them or just because you've known them for like, you know, a bit. You don't have to feel that pressure to say that. Lynn said a lot of people will experience love bombing, and then they think that they're like madly in love with this person, and they think that they're gonna marry them, have like 3 kids with them, live in a barn. But you know, like that's not always how it's going to end up working out. And then if you do let that like get to you, you're gonna end up thinking that there was something wrong with you. Like, what did I do? Like, why was it not like good enough for this person? And just know that like if you are experiencing that, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not that they like didn't want like or didn't actually love you. It's just you're in high school. And a lot of times, like Lynn said, a lot of times it's not that deep. Like a lot of things that we go through, they're just there to like help us build character, to like learn in life, and to, you know, end up being better people. So don't let like tiny things that may in the moment seem like these huge life-changing things affect you that much. And also remember, like at some point you're gonna move out of Aiken, and then you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, wow, like that was kind of a tiny town. There kind of weren't a lot of fish in the sea. Now I'm married, now I do live with my husband in a barn and have 3 kids. And you're gonna be happy, and you can just look back and reminisce about, you know, the days of growth. So, James?
And to kind of like conclude like that, this specific topic, to bridge off of what Lynn said about, you know, love bombing, and then, you know, the comments about it's not that deep, it's just a high school relationship, and that, you know, it's not like it's not the end of the world if you don't end up, you know, having that fairy tale ending with your high school sweetheart. To end off a little humorous on that one, in the words of Abby Lee Miller, everyone.
Everyone's replaceable.
In the words of Abby.
The queen, the icon, the goddess.
In the words of Abby Lee Miller, everyone's replaceable.
Everyone.
Unless you're Maddie.
Thank you for joining our podcast. We talked a lot about mental health and relationships and school in general. And thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Come back for another show. If you have anything you want us to talk about, leave a comment below.
If there's anything else you guys like to say, go ahead, you know.
So before we conclude, I just want to say this wasn't like to hate on anyone. This is just for educational purposes. So, yeah, that's it.
And I would just like to reiterate 2 very important points, is that you do matter, and that you are lovable, and that you should never feel otherwise. And, of course, Once again, in the words of Abby Lee Miller,
Everyone
everyone's
is
replaceable.
replaceable.